Hey, Vlad here from devinside.com. Welcome to another video. Unless you're new here, you're probably aware that I have been a Scala Metals user for over 2 years at this point, and generally I'm very happy with it. But there's this one thing that Metals still cannot do, namely it cannot open multiple projects in the same workspace. There is a GitHub issue, but no one has time to work on it. And so today I will show you a workaround, two workarounds in fact. The TLDR is that we're going to use SBT to create a wrapper project that will connect all of your other projects together, and then we will open this one wrapper project with something like VS Code and make sure that Metals understands all the connections. I'm sure that this is also possible with other build tools, but I've only played with SBT at this point, so let's get right to it. Alright, now as already mentioned, there are two ways that are known to me how to do it, and even though both have caveats and trade-offs, they're actually both good enough, at least for my needs. The first one is rather suited for projects that are not yours. For example, let's say you have a project which has a dependency on some library, and for some reason you prefer to have this dependency as a source dependency instead of the binary one. By the way, Git's submodules are very well suited for this. For instance, let's say that you were a contributor to the type-level ecosystem, so you would want to have some sort of playground, some sort of project that you have locally that will have the dependencies on all of the CATS projects, for example. And you would want to change those CATS projects, and therefore you would want to have those dependencies as source code dependencies. And you would want Metals to understand all of them. The benefit of this approach is that you don't have to change the build files of these dependencies, CATS in our case. So you can jump between working on CATS directly or on your playground, and everything will work at the same time. One of the downsides of this approach is that if you wanted to run commands on your source code dependencies from your SBT session, from your playground SBT session, it's a bit cumbersome, but it's possible. Another downside to this approach is that SBT is not really optimized for source code dependencies. For instance, every time SBT loads, it has to load the entire build into memory. And if you have source code dependencies, let's say 5 of them, it would be equivalent to starting 5 SBT sessions at the same time. In fact, 6, because you're starting your projects as well. All right, now the other approach is more suited for monorepos. In fact, it's more suited for a transition from multiple single repos to a monorepo, because even though it does require some changes to the build files of your dependencies, those changes are very surgical, very minimal. It's actually much easier to show than to explain, so let's get right to it. And by the way, I recently made a tutorial about SBT, so you might want to check it out. And also, please don't forget to hit the like button. It really helps me out to find more awesome people like yourself. As in most of my videos, I'm using Windows and I'm running WSL with Ubuntu 20.04 inside of it, and I'm using Windows Virtual Desktops with shortcuts that allow me to switch between windows like this and back to Ubuntu like that. I'm in my dev directory, which is currently empty, and we're going to create a folder called First Approach. Inside of it, we're going to use my Jittered template to create 2 projects. We're going to go with Scala to today. So this is going to be the first one. This is going to be our playground. We're going to call it just simply Project A. Enter, enter, enter. And we're going to create another one, and this one is going to be Project B. Project B is going to be sort of like the library, sort of like CATS. So A is going to have the dependency on B. Okay, enter, enter, enter. So we have both of them right here, and we're going to open the first one with Visual Studio Code. We probably won't even open the second one. All right, so the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go to main before Metals wakes up, and I'm just going to go over here and I'm going to change everything inside of these quotes. Nope, not now. In fact, everything around the quotes. I'm going to change it to B.main. So as you can imagine, project B looks exactly the same, right? Because it was generated based on exactly the same template. So inside of it, we have package dev inside it. Inside of it, we have package B. Inside of it, we have exactly the same main. Okay, so we're simply going to print out whatever the toString is for a Scala object. By the way, fun fact, in Scala 3, this would actually run the main, and I have no idea whether it's a bug or a feature. This is enough for now. Let's just open the build file. So we have our project A over here. We're simply going to go to the bottom of it, and we're going to say depends on B. Now, where is B? Well, B is simply a lazy val over here, which is going to be a project ref. And the project ref has 2 parameters. The first one is the directory, and we're going to use a file helper over here. And the directory is simply going to be go 1 up and then go into B. Okay, and then inside of it, right, this could be a multi-build, so it could contain multiple project definitions, multiple project IDs. So we need to specify which one we want, and we want the B, and that's it. Okay, so we can save this, and this is already enough to create this connection. So now let's create more space and launch SBT over here like this. Maybe create a little bit more space as well, like this. We can ignore those couple of warnings that are relevant for us today. So we're simply going to run our main. I have a couple of aliases. R simply means run main. And as you can see, it compiles B, then it compiles A, and it runs B.main, right? This is the toString of the main method over here. Now, even though this is not enough for metals just yet, let's stay in SBT for a bit. If we list all the projects, we're going to see that we have projects A and project B. However, we cannot simply switch into project B because it's not like a real project. It's just a reference to an existing project. Also, we cannot do something like B/clean. However, if we do something like inspect, compile, we can see these projects graphs over here, right? And we can simply steal one of them. So we can grab, for example, this one, Control-Shift-C, Control-Shift-V, there we go. And now we can do something like clean, okay? And we can also do something like run. Okay, and now it runs the hello world from B. And we could, for example, clean again, and now we could run the project A again. So it had to compile project B. And this is one of those inconveniences that I mentioned before. Now, I don't consider myself an SBT expert, so at this point, the only solution that I can offer you is aliases. All right, now let's finally import the build, and we're going to see that this is actually not going to be enough. Even though SBT understands everything, Bloop does not. As you can see over here, it says missing project B may cause compilation issues in project A. And if we actually run the metals doctor, we're also not going to see B anywhere inside. So it's simply aware about A. And this happens because B needs metals, right? It doesn't need to have the build imported. It just needs to be aware of the SBT. Well, technically, it just needs Bloop, not even metals. So at this point, we have two choices. We can either go and change the build of the project B, but I sort of promised you that this approach would not require any changes to the build. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to specify a global SBT plugin, which is going to be metals, or technically SBT Bloop. So I'm going to open the terminal like this, and we're going to make sure that the directory .sbt/1.0/plugins exists. Okay, and now what we're going to do is we're simply going to go into our project, right? Inside of it, there's going to be metals.sbt that metals generated for us. So we're going to simply steal it real quick, and we're going to go into SBT 1.0 plugins, and we're going to rename it to something like build.sbt, because if we leave it as metals, it will actually be modified by metals. All right, so simply going to do this, and now we're going to open it with Visual Studio Code 1.0 plugins and build. We actually don't need to open it, but we can. So we can simply remove this comment. Okay. And by the way, the version over here doesn't really matter. There is a setting somewhere inside of VS Code Metals that tells it which Bloop version to use anyway. So as long as you have something in here, it's going to work out just fine. All right. So we have this thing. We can close it now, and we can simply re-import the build. And this time it is going to work. Let's close this one as well. Let's import the build. All right. There we go. So maybe we should save the file. And also, I recently got into a habit of doing cascade compile like this. We should also run the doctor, and now we're going to see that B is actually now there, right? So there's B and there's B.test, okay? Which means that we can go over here and we can see the type, or we can, for example, actually something is still wrong. Hold on. Let's close the file and open it again. Like these things sometimes happen, right? But we already should be able to jump in there, right? So we just jumped into main and back, but I'm not seeing the lenses, and I don't know why. This sometimes happens in VS Code. I'm not even sure if it's Metals fault or not, but it should actually work fine. Maybe we should actually recompile the entire build just in case. But yeah, these things sometimes happen. Yeah, so see, now it actually starts to compile. So even though we could jump in there, only now it actually starts the compilation. Even I asked it to to cascade the compilation and stuff. So we should see the lances at this point. There we go. There we go. There's our lens. So now we should be able to see the types, right? There's B, there's main. We can jump in there. We can come back. However, look, notice that usually when you jump into some dependencies, for example, let's jump into something like app, it actually opens it in read-only. However, if we jump into main, it is actually our stuff, right? So it is over there on my system, and therefore, if we go into SBT, for example, I resetted VS Code, so we need to wait a second. So let's do a continuous run over here. And for example, I don't know, we could create like an object B in here, and we could do like something from B equals in B like this, and we can go over here now, and we can just do B dot, and we should see the object B. So we have auto completion, everything works just fine. And notice that it obviously triggers the compilation of B because it knows that the dependencies are all there. All right, so this is already some progress, right? So we have the compilation going on. Metals understands everything. However, it is still inconvenient to work on project B because it's not over here. So I hope that you're aware that if we simply close VS Code right now and open the entire directory, the entire first approach, Metals is going to be confused because it's going to say like, hey, there is no Metals build, no SPT build, I'm sorry, no Bloop build in the root directory, right? This is the main issue that we're trying to solve. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to open A again, and then we're going to go to File, and we're going to go to Add Folder to Workspace, and we're simply going to select B like this. Okay, so now it's over here in Workspace, and VS Code sometimes restarts because now it understands that this is like a workspace kind of thing. And did it create another instance? No, it did not. Okay, so it's all good. Okay, so Metals should still wake up in just a couple of seconds. There we go, indexing the build. So everything should work exactly the same, right? And once it finally finishes the indexing, which it did, so as you can see, if I jump in there, it understands that it's now over there. So now you can work on both of them. However, this approach has a big downside because A is still driving this whole scenario. So if you have some project that has a dependency on A, which means that A is completely unaware of it, this approach is not going to work, right? So you can only have like one root, which is A, right? We simply added B to the same workspace, but it only works for sort of like, I don't even know how to describe it, like tree-like dependency graph. So we have like one project, one main project like A, and it has dependencies on all of the others, then it's going to work, right? As soon as there's something like sort of like below A, something that A is not aware of, it's not going to work out because you would need to open somehow A and this other project that depends on A, or you would need to start like below, right? However, you understand that it doesn't always work. So we need to abandon the simple workspace approach and use SBT to create a wrapper project that is aware of all of them, right? In this case, A and B. Okay, so let's close this one real quick, and we're going to open the entire directory. By the way, I have an alias C that simply does code space dot. Okay, I always need to pay attention that it doesn't accidentally create another instance of VS Code because it sometimes does that. I think it understands that there's now a workspace, and sometimes it does this thing. And now I don't know which one is a. Okay, so this one is a workspace, right? Because it understands that there is a workspace. And so when you open a directory which contains a workspace, it also opens it as a workspace, and it leaves the other instance open. I only need the instance that has it as directories, okay? And yeah, so as you can see, Metals didn't wake up because it's just two directories. So what we need to do is over here, we need to create yet another project, and this one is going to be -o dot, which means use the dot as the output directory, right? So before it created a directory called A, it created a directory called B, but now I want to say generate everything into this one, okay? So we're gonna call this one, I guess we could call it first approach like this, okay? There we go, like this. So now if we look into VS Code, we have pretty much an SBT built in here. And usually SBT should wake up at this point. Maybe I should open something over here. Maybe if it doesn't wake up, then it's another VS Code issue that we would need. Yeah, there we go. Okay, but we don't need to import it, not now. In fact, we're not going to need the entire source directory, right? Because this project is going to serve only one purpose. It's simply going to aggregate all the other projects. All right, so let's open the build, namely this one, okay? And we're simply going to go over here, and we're going to say that we're going to aggregate both A and B, okay? And A is going to be over here. Same thing as before. It's going to be a project ref of some file, which is going to be just A, right? Because we don't need to go up, right? Just AA, and we're going to do this over here, and we're going to do this and this and this. Okay, so we have like two references, right? And by the way, notice that we're using this reference twice, right? So we're I'm sorry, this one, right? So we have B over here, and if we open the build file for A, we also have the same project reference, right? It's fine that it's defined twice. There's, it's not a big deal, all right? And so now if we import the build, right, we're importing the build for this wrapper project, and therefore the wrapper project is aware of both A and B, and so it's going to work out. Something went wrong. It says no class def found error. This actually sometimes happens. I don't know exactly what it is. This is probably some sort of race condition, because if I import the build again, everything is going to work out just fine. So let's do this again. Now, a partial import failure is actually not such a big problem. It just happens because, for many reasons, I have a relatively complicated build, and sometimes SBT doesn't like the fact when you specify the same compiler flags twice, things like this. I have like word remover in there. there. So partial failure is not such a big problem. You could clean it up if you wanted, right? But this is just like the basic foundation. Let's go into the terminal and launch SBT. There we go. In the meantime, we can also cascade the compilation. We can also run the doctor and see how it looks like. There we go. Right, so we have the first approach and test. We have A and B. We have the entire our first approach build. And we can also open something like the main and A, and we can see that it should all be fine, right? So we can jump into stuff, something from B, something is still loading. There we go, and we can go back. It's all good. By the way, notice how long it takes to just launch the SBT session, because technically it launches 3 SBT sessions, right? The current one, the one for A, and the one for B. And they have, even like .scala files, so now it actually has to compile, the build files and so on. We don't have the lances, but this could be a VS Code issue. Yeah, not sure. But in any case, you can go and you can go out. You have the completion, right? So you have the something from B. Now you can run the projects, right? But you have kind of the same issue, right? So if you have like projects, right, then you have this thing. So you can't just do like a run or something like this, okay? So you can do some like inspect compile. And because we have like this wrapper project and inside of it, we have 2 projects, SBT actually allows for an interesting syntax over here. I actually have no idea where it comes from. And I have no idea whether it's a bug or a feature, right? So we have already seen this before, right? Where you can just do like this thing and then /run. Okay, let's create more space. But what you can actually do is, let me remove the cursor. You can go over here and you can remove everything until this slash. And you can do dot dot, and you have to remove the colon, and then whatever you have over here, it doesn't really matter. You can actually do something like blah blah blah, and somehow, don't ask me how, but this is gonna work, right? I run this thing and it actually runs A. It also runs B if we wanted to. For some reason it sees the main twice, but it's actually the same main. So if I run it, let's actually go in there and change this to test or something like this. Okay, so we can run this, and I'm gonna press 1, and I'm gonna run it again, and I'm gonna press 2, and it's going to run exactly the same one. I have no idea why it's shown, but in any case, the point is that you can go into aliases for the main project, and you can simply create an alias, right? You can do add command alias, right? And we're simply going to sort of like overwrite run, okay, comma space, and over here we're going to grab one of these guys, go over here and paste, and in fact we're probably gonna need A here and A over here, and we probably should use 2 3 like this, and go over here and do it like this. There we go. Okay, now we're not going to re-import the build, but now we should be able to simply say run. There we go. SBT noticed that there was a change, so now it needs to reload the build. This time it's going to be a little bit faster than before. There we go. I'm in B. And by the way, let me show you how long it actually takes SBT to start up, right? So I'm obviously recording, and I'm on a laptop, right? So it's not that fast, but still, I'm gonna do SBT exit, and I have this plugin over here for ZSH that will tell me how long it took, right? So simply going to launch SBT, get out of there, and it should probably take, I don't know, like 30 seconds, maybe even a minute. All right, so it took 1.5 minutes, as you can see over here. But I have to be honest, this is too much. When I was practicing, it was about like 30 seconds or so. I even checked my OBS. I didn't drop any frames, but still, like, something somewhere inside of it, it was hanging for no reason. I'm pretty sure that it should be around 30 seconds maximum. But even so, 30 seconds is freaking a lot. This is basically like 3 Hello World projects, right? All right, so at this point we have a working thingy, but it's annoying that SBT takes forever to load, and it's also annoying that we can't simply access our projects properly. We have to do this nonsense. So the second approach is more suited for mono repos. In fact, let's initialize a Git repository so that I can show you the change. This one actually requires minimal changes to your projects. Obviously, it depends on your constellation. In our case, we're still not going to change B. We're simply going to change A. Okay, so if you go and open the build for A, then over here, when we're saying that it depends on B, right, over here, we're going to use a fancy thing called LocalProject, right? And we're going to say B, right? So what this means is basically that the build, like the project ID, for project B is not defined in this build file. It will be defined somewhere else, and if it's not, then SBT will simply fail, okay? Therefore, we don't need this ProjectRef. We can simply remove it like this, and we're gonna go to the main build, which is this generic one, okay? And we're simply going to say that project A and project B are not ProjectRefs, right? They're simply these guys, okay? So we're gonna do this over here, and we're gonna find the dot over here and replace it with an A. We're going to do the same thing over here, right? So these are now completely normal projects, A and B. And yes, let's import the build. All right, let's also go into the terminal and launch SBT. And in the meantime, we can open the main. We can see that everything works now, and we also have our lances in both projects, right? So if we go to B main, we have our lance as well. We have our lances in our tests. Everything works much better. In fact, this is the approach that we use at work. We have a monorepo with like, I don't know, 20, 30 projects. I have no idea how many. All right. And so if we go to A main, we have, you know, the same things. You know, everything is working, right? You have the auto completion, right? We have all the things, right? Dot reverse or something like this because it's a string. Reverse, there we go. It's all good. And now if we go projects like this, right, these are now the proper projects, right? So you can do A run, okay, or you can do B run, and everything is going to work. B run, there we go. In fact, I just remembered that we forgot to remove the alias. We actually don't need it anymore, like this, okay? Not now. I'm not sure why it sees the main twice, because at this point it actually should not see twice. Well, honestly, I wasn't even sure why it saw it in the beginning. Okay, so let's do like 1. All right, so let's do A run. Now it's reverse. Let's do B run 2. There we go. Again, I have no idea why it does this, because it should be only once, because before we used ProjectRefs, and I used the same ProjectRef twice, but now I'm simply saying that, hey, this is just a dependency on some local project B, and it's probably because I was thinking because it's still defined twice, right? So in B build, right over here, right? It's already defined over here, and also in the main build, we're defining it again, right? But we're doing the same thing for project A, so it actually should be fine. It's important to understand at this point that we changed the build file for A, right? So we did this thing. So if you were to launch SBT just for project A, it will say that it cannot find the project B. Since we're still playing, let's actually go and do this. So we're going to go into B, and we're simply going to launch, we need to go into A, right? And we need to launch SBT, and it's not going to be able to load because it's going to say that it cannot find the project B. There we go. It finally loaded. As a reminder, I'm on a laptop. It's very hot in this room, and I'm recording and stuff, so it took forever. But at some point in the end, it finally said no project B in file, right? Because it was looking for a local project B, but it was not defined anywhere. Cool. That's all I wanted to show you today. Hopefully, Metals will support this natively someday, but until then, you have 2 workarounds. I'll see you in the next one, and for now, as always, it's been Vlad from devinsideyou.com. Don't forget to like this video if you did, subscribe if you want to improve the developer inside you, and if you learned something today, please consider supporting me on GitHub sponsors or Patreon, whichever you prefer, and let's watch my videos weeks and sometimes even months before everyone else. And most importantly, take care.